What's going on, guys? Eric Pate here, back with another video, and today I'm going to be talking is another aviation what if, and we're going to be looking at TWA 800. Before I get into detail of what happened in this case, while I'm talking about some of the notes I took on the case, on TWA Flight 800's case, was I want you guys to think about answer and tell me in the comments what you guys think would have happened in this situation, in this case. So before, and then I'm gonna tell you guys what I think would have happened in the case of TWA 800. Alright, so before I even ask the question, the reason why I came up with this question was because there was a missing passenger. Passenger checked in a bag that was in a cargo hold. Turned out that passenger was nowhere to be found. Caused about an hour and 15-minute delay. But it turned out that passenger was actually on board the whole time. So, the question is, but it took them an hour and 15 minutes or so to find them, because they were actually they were going to do a 7 o'clock takeoff. Instead, they ended up doing an 8:15 takeoff. So the question is, what if the missing passenger was found sooner on TWA 800? Okay. So now, since the question is asked, while I go into detail of what happened, I want you guys to think. I want you guys to think about the question and tell me in the comments what you think would have happened. So, there's two separate investigations going on. There was the NTSB investigation, and there was an FBI investigation going on. Every time the commercial plane crashes on American soil, the NTSB has to investigate. Well, the FBI was involved because it is almost unheard of a plane exploding in midair. Because when Pan Am 103 and Air India 182, both planes, and Iran Air 655, all three of those planes explode in midair. Pan Am 103 and Air India 182 both had a bomb. And both bombs were in suitcases that were checked in by a passenger, but that passenger didn't end up boarding. That passenger was nowhere to be found on either planes. Both planes ended up crashing. Air India 182 killed about... How many people were killed in Air India 182?
The answer I found is 329.
As Siri just said, 329 people were killed in Air India 182.
Okay, I found this on the web for Air India 182. Check it out.
I forgot the Siri was still activated. So I just don't want to make sure it was activated again. And in the Pan Am 103 incident, 270 people were killed. How many people were on Pan Am 103?
I found this on the web.
And that was 259 passengers and crew and 11 people on the ground. Because everybody died in both incidents that were on board. Both of these planes were killed. Actually, on all four of the crashes I'm touching on, everybody was actually killed. Everybody on board. Even everybody on board TWA 800 was killed. So Iran Air Flight 655, I believe had 290. How many people were on board Iran Air 655?
Here's an answer from Britannica.com. Iran Air Flight 655.
Okay, killing all 290 passengers. Well, reason why I specifically chose these three is because it's okay. I could have done Now I realize, I probably should have done Korean Air 007 also, but that was a air-to-air missile. We're talking about a surface-to-air missile because there was actual missile testing going on from ships in the sea. But so now this is what the FBI was looking for, was missile and bomb. But here's what the NTSB was looking for. What caused the center fuel tank to explode? What caused it to explode? So there was 3 questions that were asked. Was the fuel flammable? Can the fuel tank rupture? And what caused the spark? So 96 degrees is what the fuel can be in order for it to start burning. 96. Okay? In these air disasters I watched, they can simulate what happened by performing something called a flight test. So what a flight test is, it's basically what the flight test is basically they can try to get everything in the same conditions that it was on that day. And then they can actually try to fly the plane's route just so they can try to get an little idea of, and then they have like a bunch of sensors connected to a computer. Okay? All the sensors that are connected to the computer that they're using during the flight test, what that does is that gives them readings and the fuel temperature suspected to be at the time of the explosion. And they even had the plane on for the same amount of time TWA 800 was, which could have been for about anywhere from 90 minutes to about 2 hours. And I'm just making this stuff up. I actually don't know. But the tank temperature at the time, the fuel temperature at the time when TWA 800 exploded, was at 127 degrees. So we know for a fact the fuel was flammable. Can the fuel tank rupture? So for this, they didn't do a flight test. What they did is, I don't know if you heard of the show Mythbusters. But they can, so they basically try out different myths or whatever. Well, so what they did was, again, same conditions that TWA 800 was. Then at the time of the explosion of TWA 800, they had the same pressure it was and all that. Next, the question was answered. The fuel tank could rupture because it was over 2 times of something, which caused it to for the fuel tank to rupture. But the last thing they were looking for was what caused the spark. Now, okay, I think before they went into the fuel tank, what caused the spark? Actually, I'm going to get into what I was going to say here in a second. But what caused the spark was, all the ACs were running and whatnot during the whole hour and 15-minute delay for all the passengers and crew that were on board. By the time the plane got into New York to the time it took off from JFK, it was about 3 hours and 25 minutes. It was probably on and everything. So, but anyway, there was a short circuit regarding the air conditioning system, which caused, which went into the center fuel tank, which caused the explosion, and which caused the plane to went down. There was actually signs before the explosion that something was up at the airplane. If I remember seeing right in the documentary I was watching, the light was blinking. Those cabin lights, like those reading lights you can hit. If you don't know what I'm talking about, okay. You're on a plane. You're flying. I'm just doing an example. You're flying from Dallas Love Field to Chicago Midway. I'm just using one of my flights, for example. They typically turn off the cabin lights, but you are trying to read. Let's see. You're trying to read. I'm just gonna go over in the book. You're trying to read Diary of a Kid with the Third Wheel. Say that. Okay? But you can't see. They have something called overhead reading lights. Where is that located? Well, you're trying to adjust your air conditioners to blow on you or whatever. If there's a button right next to it with a light bulb on it. If you hit that button, that turns on the reading lights. These reading lights were like blinking on and off. And passengers were like, something's going on. And then in the cockpit, they're like, huh. They know something was going on with engine 4. Sorry, I didn't know what I was going to say. They're like, yeah, it looks like we're having some trouble with engine 4 because the indicator just kept going back and forth. And then of course, you guys know what happened. Short circuit. In the fuel tank, plane exploded, plunges right into the ocean. Now, the FBI basically closed the case after this. For a case with an explosion, they typically rebuild only the part of the plane that exploded. Just so they can try to pinpoint where exactly the impact was, or where the explosion came from. Because they use a method called stringing. But while the NTSB was trying to do their investigation, the FBI was trying to get in the way, trying to keep saying they found more residue of like a bomb, more residue that can be found by a bomb or by a missile. So what they ended up doing, I'm not saying they stopped their investigation, but it probably felt that way. But they basically rebuilt the whole, fuselage of the plane. And then they brought in the lead FBI investigator, and they said, look, we just saw what the NTSB did. By the looks of it, a bomb was not involved. Or a missile was involved. None of those two things were involved. So, that basically ended the FBI investigation. It took about 4 years for their investigation to be completed. Just because of the fact, I think also because they had to basically rebuild the 747. Now, I asked you at the beginning of the video if y'all thought about it. I'm going to ask it again, and then I'm going to answer it. What I think would have happened. So the question was, what if the missing passenger was actually found sooner on TWA 800 than he was? I think even if he was found, I think minimum of 15 minutes earlier. Maybe more time after. But minimum of 15. I personally think the plane probably would haven't exploded. Because at the time of the explosion, like I mentioned earlier, the fuel tank was 127, way above the flammable degree. But I seriously think that if he was found sooner, the plane probably would have exploded. I think the plane would have landed in Paris, or probably would have had enough time to turn around to New York to make an emergency landing, because the passengers were noticing those rating lights were flickering in the and then the indicator on engine number 4 was going all willy-nilly. Now, do I think they would have probably made an emergency landing? Probably not, since they were already delayed. But I think the plane probably would have landed in Paris if he was even found 15 minutes before he was. That at time of takeoff, it was actually already, if I remember seeing right, it was probably already above the flammable temperature. So honestly, I think in this situation, I honestly think TWA 800 wouldn't have crashed if the missing passenger was found at least 15 minutes before he was. Let me know what you guys think would have happened if he was found at least 15 minutes before. Like, subscribe, comment, favorite. You guys go be awesome. Eric Pate, don't forget the hates. See you in the next What If.